Thank you. Welcome members to this meeting of the Lochaber Committee on Monday the 19th of April. First of all, apologies for absence. We have apologies from Councillor Neil McLean this morning.
Okay, I haven't received any more.
Okay, thank you. And we shall move on to declarations of interest. Members, do you have any declarations of interest? I would be surprised if there are, looking at today's agenda. And then that brings us on to the report from our Scottish and Fire Service colleague, and I think it's over to Mike Collier this morning. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Chair. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Good. Glad to hear it. So Q3 report for ourselves. Actually, another positive report. We had, unfortunately, a number of RTCs in the October period, which were a little bit concerning, but a number of them were actually make safe rather than extrications or deal with casualties in a large format. So I was quite pleased to see that, and the numbers are down. Probably still continue as in line with the lack of tourism and traffic, etc., that we have. We also found that accidental dwelling fires were very low. So our accidental fires are low as well. So again, and it is similar to how I reported last period, that we do not have a lot of activity at this moment of time. However, I anticipate that we will be moving towards an increased activity period over the coming weeks and months as we progress forward. We have a number of what we call UFAS, unwanted fire alarm signals, in some of our premises, and these are hotels predominantly. And I really identified that those are probably due to the lack of staff being in there, work ongoing during periods of quietness, etc., that they're doing these things. You'll also note that our recruitment has been, our numbers are still down. We haven't seen a massive increase in recruitment. Hopefully those of you that use social media will see that we released quite a proactive video this week or last week, and we will continue to put that out over our social platforms and encourage people to come and join us where we can. We now have a young girl, I should say young girl, she's in her mid-30s, she's young to me, working in the Ardnamurchan Peninsula, doing the same role as Chris Finlay in Fort William and supporting our stations out there. And she's very proactive. So I would like to anticipate that we'll see some increase in recruitment in that area as well. I'm not going to mess around though, but we have identified, and probably nationally, we're looking at a sort of strategy going forward for our retained and volunteer, because we recognise that a number of our retained and volunteer personnel are of an older age and they're coming to that end of life for working within the organisation. So we really are having to be quite proactive as an organisation, saying how do we move that forward. And we now have a strategic team working on 19 different strands to try and improve that, looking at models elsewhere in the UK and abroad and how we can implement that, which will be much more effective for us and give us better delivery to our communities. So that was a quick whirlwind tour. If there's anything you want to ask me, as I say, there's no major topics apart from recruitment at this moment in time, but we are very much, we've got our eyes on that and we're working hard on that. There is a terms and conditions for the retained being discussed this week, because they have new terms and conditions to bring them in line with the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. That's something that's been outstanding for a couple of years, and that should also help some of the recruitment processes as well. So Chair, I'll take any questions if anybody wants to.
Thank you, Mike, for that report. Much appreciated. And may I welcome, as one of the councillors for Fort William and Ardnamurchan ward, the appointment of the District Support Officer to assist the stations on the peninsula, which of course is a long-term concern about staff recruitment on the peninsulas. And I'm sure myself and ward colleagues will continue to do everything we can to support and publicise the opportunities for residents on the peninsula to train as retained firemen or fire personnel. Colleagues, are there any specific questions relating to the report? I think you might have got off lightly today, Mike, which is unusual. Yeah, I don't see any questions. So thank you very much for your time. As always, the job that you and all your firefighters do is very much appreciated, and we're particularly conscious that you're coming in to what can traditionally be a difficult time of the year at the moment, with the potential for wildfires, particularly after a very dry winter and spring. And I think I take this opportunity as this committee to emphasise the warnings that your fire service have given out over the last week about the potential for wildfires here over in the west, and we wish you luck in dealing with any incidences that occur. Let's hope that they are minimal and easy to deal with.
Thank you very much for that, Chair. At the moment, they seem to be predominantly on the east or the north, so as far as I'm concerned, they can keep them over there. But we do anticipate we will see some on the west shortly. But we also got a bit of a concern around some of the influx of tourism and traffic, etc., as we move forward. So I don't know if you're aware, but we weren't actually having our personnel on stations doing physical training, so we're looking to bring them back now under the relaxation of the COVID restrictions, and we'll start to have them training and be prepped and ready for anticipating any of these incidents that we have to attend. So I appreciate your support. It's very much, thank you very much, and we will continue to do everything we can to support our communities.
Many thanks, Mike. Thank you for your time this morning.
Okay,
see you
thank
on
you.
the next occasion. Thank you.
Cheers, Ed. Thank you.
And item 4 is education update, which I assume is going to be provided by Don Essen. I don't see Don there on my list at the moment.
No, neither am I, Chairman. I have just dropped an email, but I see Richard is online. I don't know if, Chairman, you want to move to the roads item, and I'll just try and get hold of Don just now.
Yeah, I think we will do that with members' agreement. We shall move on to the Lochaber area roads maintenance programme as set out in front of us. Richard, if you forgive me, I don't think it probably requires any introduction from you. It's quite straightforward, and so I think we'll get to the meat of the debate and hand you over to the wild pit of my colleagues, who I'm sure will have many questions to ask you, or will be chivvying for a different emphasis on particular areas. The one thing that occurred to me going through this report that would be really very helpful, Richard, for you to circulate to members is, although you list in 4.2 that the current revenue budget allocation for Lochaber is a little over £1 million, could we have an indication as to how that is split between labour, plant and materials, etc.? We don't have no idea how that money is spent within the revenue budget. I don't recall seeing any direct figures for Lochaber recently, but maybe I've missed them. I think that would be useful to know how that budget is divided up and what potential there is for councillors influencing how that particular budget is directed. And I think I have another question before I go. I think probably across to Blair. First of all, I have another question, and that is about the use of the jet patcher. So can you tell members how many jet patches there are in the Highlands, and the jet patcher that we have access to here in Lochaber? What geographical area is that shared across, and how is its time to Lochaber allocated? In other words, is it allocated on the basis across the entire area of road network length in each area, which I suspect may be the case, or is it allocated on the basis of road condition and the number of roads that are in the poorest category? And if it isn't based on that allocation model, then should it be, as I'm very mindful of out of the southern areas, Lochaber has traditionally had the worst one of the worst road condition reports in the council compared to many other areas within the south of the Highlands as well. From recollection, the worst roads when they are reported to strategic committee across the whole of the Highlands are Badenoch, Lochaber and Skye, but we don't see to get allocation of funding on the basis of road condition it's still done on the basis of road length. And surely the use of something like jet patcher should be sent to where it is needed most in terms of poor road condition, rather than being kept in areas where the road condition is considerably better. So there you are. I'll give you a moment to think about that, and I'll go round my colleagues next. Who's up next? Blair? Did I see your hand up? Or maybe I was mistaken.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I've got a comment to make in regard to the proposals, specific proposals, as you would say, the meat of the agenda. But a daft laddie question, first of all, since you've listed a few questions for Richard. Could Richard, you remind me of the difference between surface dressing, overlaying, inlaying? Could you just give me a brief technical outline of that? I know you've done that before, but I could do with that refresher. And I'll come back, if I might, shortly, Andrew, on a specific area of road that I would like to see getting better treatment this year. Thank you.
That's fine, Blair. We will do that. Alan, do you have a technical question for Richard, and then we can bundle up those questions and get Richard to answer those, and then we'll deal with any specific proposals afterwards.
No, it's not technical. It's more a proposal. Thanks.
Okay, Ben, do you have a specific question at this moment?
I do have a technical one, Andrew. Okay. It's pretty much a follow-up to the point that you were asking about the jet patcher, because it's about the so as I understand it, there's a fairly objective measurement of major deterioration in road quality, but the jet patcher is quite often used for what the question is, the work done by the jet patcher, my understanding is it's used in many cases for repairs that might not show up in that objective form. So it's effectively comparing, I guess, the area roads inspector's view of their patch compared to other roads inspector's view of their patch. You see what I mean? I'm just trying to understand how objective the various road condition measures can be when deploying the jet patcher. Andrew was asking about whether it's done on road length or condition. To the extent it can be done on condition, how objective can those measurements be, given it's fairly small, but it's shorter term repairs that are being done. The other thing I just wanted to mention was locally I've seen some really good work done by the roads team in terms of bell mouths, particularly working together with Bear. So on the Tom Doon Road, for example, was one. It would be great to see more of that. So one that continually get questioned about is the entrance to the Anna Industrial Estate, which I drove past recently, and it is crater-like. I think it would just be good to hear publicly what the definition of the cover of the bell mouth is, as to what is the responsibility of each roads authority, particularly when there's a pavement. There's a pavement alongside the trunk road. My understanding is it's Bear's responsibility for the bit between the pavement, if you like, even if it appears to be on the Highland Council side of the white line. So just some clarity as to how we deal with Bear, and just to express my thanks to Kristen Tate, particularly for dealing well with them and getting some jobs done locally. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I think we'll go back to Richard to answer those questions, if you can, Richard.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Chairman, members, board manager. So yeah, happy to answer these questions, and thank you for taking time to look at the report. So the first question was about whether we can get more detail on the revenue budget, so I can certainly do that. And then the jet patcher, excuse me, I just take a drink of water. The jet patcher that we use in Lochaber is a hired jet patcher. So, and we use part of this program, this capital program, to pay for that. So we usually have it for a month, and that costs between £40,000 and £50,000, and that's part of this program. And so we make up our own program, planned so that we get maximum use of it while it's here. I'm answering a couple of questions at once here because it's a mixture between objective data that we have and subjective opinion as to what are most urgent in terms of potholes, because the jet patcher is best used for filling potholes. It's an efficient way of doing that. It's a cold lay process, so it's cold emulsion plus chips, 10mm chips or 6mm chips, and but it does act as a permanent repair. If you're using it on a bend which is getting constantly scoured out by Arctics, then it doesn't stand up to it like a hot repair would. But on a single track road or a straight piece of road, these patches will stand up for a long time. Just trying to think whether that answers your whole question. I'm trying to remember whether there is an owned council machine, and I believe there is, and I think it's based in Inverness and serves the Inner Murray Firth area, just from a geographical basis. Yeah, so yeah, we tend to do, it actually suits us, my personal opinion, and I'm happy for that to be disputed, but it at the moment and for the last few years, it has suited us to hire our own. We've got total control over where it goes. We have it for a short window. We get maximum productivity from it, and that works quite well. We're therefore in this area, we're only paying for exactly what we use, and we're able to plan the program, plan where we cache our chips and the emulsion, and it works quite well. So that was a bit of an answer on the jet patcher. Happy to take any more questions on that.
Richard, can I interrupt you there?
Yeah,
as we're talking about the jet patcher. So it's interesting to hear that revelation that Inverness and the Inner Murray Firth has its own dedicated jet patcher, but I'm not surprised whatsoever by that. And so I'm assuming from what you've said that you are hiring it for Lochaber for a month.
Yeah.
And then you must be hiring it for other areas within your area remit as well. So you must be hiring it for a month in somewhere like Badenoch.
Yeah, it's actually a month for Badenoch and Nairn together. So Badenoch actually will get it for 2.5 weeks, and Nairn will get it for a week and a half. That roughly reflects the difference in the budgets.
Okay. And so on that basis, we're spending £100,000 a year to hire a piece of equipment for a 2-month period in the South Highlands. What's the capital cost for one of these jet patches? £500,000?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, easily.
And so why is there no justification that we actually have a dedicated jet patcher that can be used for a much longer period across Lochaber, Badenoch and Strathspey? Because obviously that must have been the case that's been put in the Inverness and Inner Murray Firth area, where I would say the roads are considerably better, and not surprising if they've got this level of capital funding to assist with repairs. Why hasn't that case been put for covering South Highlands with a similar piece of equipment?
Well, it would have an impact on the revenue budget.
But it's having an impact on the revenue budget at the tune of £100,000 a year already.
No, it's a capital budget that's paying for that. Yeah, the
Okay.
revenue. Yeah, if we owned that machine, we'd have to maintain it, and we'd have to man it.
So in essence,
we'd have to try and maximise the use of it all year round.
Okay, so it's a dodge within the budget to not put any burden on the revenue budget, in other words, by hiring this equipment out of the capital budget each year.
Yeah, well, the way I see it is at the moment is it's it's an efficient arrangement. We're hiring in a resource when we need it, and that's it. Otherwise, we'd have to find work for that. The reason being for it being in the Inner Murray, when we tend to say the Inner Murray Firth area, it's because there's a high concentration of roads and population in a relatively small geographic area, so you can maximize the use of that machine there. Whereas if I was trying to sorry, it's also spread across, I guess. I'm just guessing here a little because I don't know for sure. I haven't studied it for a while, but it'll be spread over the Rochaber revenue budget and the Inverness revenue budget. And with the size of Inverness and then the proximity of Dingwall and perhaps Easter Ross as well, then I'm guessing that they're able to maximise the efficiency of it. I don't think it's on a chassis. I don't think it's a multi-use vehicle, and there's a lot of disadvantages to having a multi. For example, you could take the kit off the chassis and put a gritter on for the winter, and then you could maximise the use of the lorry that way. But that's not always the best thing to do, because the deterioration you then get on the lorry through the winter due to using it in salt, etc., can be quite dramatic, and you can even get damage to it, so that it's then not available to do jet patching for example, in the summer. So there's all sorts of aspects come into it when you're trying to maximise the use of a lorry all year. Obviously, you can't jet patch in the middle of winter.
Okay, sorry to labour this point, Richard. And if I was being less charitable, I would say that the Inner Murray, Firth and Inverness are benefiting not because of the concentration of roads, but because of the concentration of councillors that tend to get their own way within this council and get the resources that go with it. And where I'm finding it difficult, and I think many of my residents are finding it difficult, particularly after the last year, when we've seen a substantial deterioration in many of the local roads, is, and I understand where you're coming from, where you think this is an efficient use of resources. But the flip side of that is that it means that the efficient repair of potholes is concentrated into a 1 month period within Lochaber. But potholes appear throughout the year, and I recognise that you can't jet patch during the winter months, but we do have a significant period during the rest of the year when we can do it. And in those time periods, then I assume that we go along and shovel in a couple of shovel loads of coal tar into the pothole, and as I've seen, reverse over it quickly and then drive off. And then we've got multiple repairs like that until the jet patcher can come along and actually repair that hole more efficiently. So there could be an argument that actually having a dedicated piece of capital equipment for, I'm not suggesting Lochaber, but for a wider area would be as equally an efficient use of that capital equipment.
There's other ways to fill potholes. There's discussion at the moment on spending some capital money on another type of equipment, which is the brand name is Newfelt, a Newfelt machine, which is actually a van with an infrared heater, which is about 1 meter square, can heat up the pothole. You can rework the material, add a bit of extra material, roll it, and you've effectively got a hot patch repair without having to import hot material, because you're heating the material on site. Mm-hmm. So that's another way. Another way we do quite a lot of around the Highlands is a manual version of the jet patcher, which is literally a man with a Rouser watering can full of coal tar emulsion and shovels chips into the hole, and that actually works incredibly well. It competes quite well in terms of cost, but it's just not quite so productive. 2 good men and well, 4 good men can probably use the equivalent of 4 barrels of tar a day on that method. Jet patcher uses about 6 per day. Quality is the same. If costs are about, efficiency costs are about the same, but productivity is slightly is 1/3 better with the jet patcher. This is based on some figures I did a while ago, so they may have changed. But yeah, so there's different techniques for filling. The other one, obviously, is to dig out and do a hot tar patch with a squad, and that could be cutting out a square edge with a floor saw, and then lifting out the material with a digger, and then bringing in with a hot box lorry hot tar, laying it, rolling it. Equally, you could use a planer head on the front of on the back of a JCB, plane it out rather than a square edge with a floor saw. But you can just plane it out. It's a bit rougher, but then you can also do a hot patch repair that way with a squad. So our problem is with the DLO usually, if we're involved in programs like surface dressing locally, which we do in Lochaber, and recycling, which we do in Lochaber, then virtually the whole squad is tied up doing that, so they can't be away doing potholes on other roads. However, in Lochaber, because of the tendency to have wet summers and the dry spell at this time of year, we luckily get the surface dressing train very early on. So in early May, we're able to do our surface dressing program, and then that does leave the whole of the rest of the summer for our squads to attend to potholes, and that tends to be what we do. So you'll see in this program there's contingencies there for hot tar patching and edging works. So that is dealing with potholes, and that will be the plan for the whole of the rest of the summer. Obviously, in running it, the DLO, we have other considerations through the summer as well. You know, holidays for the men to take is one of them. We've got grass cutting to deal with, the whole gambit of work. So we're balancing pothole filling between, you know, replacing passing place signs and any other schemes that come up that we might be required to get on with. We've actually got a number of registers of works on the go at any one time. So we have this capital program we're talking about now. We've got a whole host of complaints and subjective knowledge that we have about potholes and culverts and ditches that we're trying to deal with through the whole year. On the revenue side, we have work that we're doing with colleagues on STTS schemes for roads, which is external money coming in. We've got this additional strategic capital this year. For example, roads that are not on this program, but we're keen to deal with the B8006 to Kilhoan. We might manage to persuade that to be on a strategic list. Equally, the A884 Liddesdale, which was on last year's program but not this year's program, we may manage to get that onto the strategic list. And then we've got visitor management scheme projects that we're getting involved with now too. So there's always an awful lot going on, and we're always trying to balance the various priorities. And in terms of the general situation when it comes to potholes, the flatlining of the budgets and the increasing costs, variable costs and fixed costs over the years, and indeed cutbacks, have meant that the budget does not go as far as usual. So one of the biggest efficiencies in that situation is to do as much surface dressing as possible, because it extends the life of the road by about 10 years. I could explain for Councillor Allen the difference at this point maybe. So surface dressing extends the life of the road. It's a thin layer of liquid emulsion tar and a thin layer of chips on top of that. So it provides grip and texture. The chips do that, and the emulsion allows those chips to stick to the road, and the emulsion seals the road from ingress of water, which stops the freeze-thaw effect over the winter and the damage from that. So it extends the life of the road by about 10 years, and it costs about, depending on whether you include pre-patching and lining and things, it costs between £3 and £5 a square metre. Surfacing, you're resurfacing the road, which is a different operation, when it's become so badly potholed and broken up that that's really the only option. Surfacing costs anywhere between, well, there's two types. There's the overlay and the inlay. So overlay is basically putting a layer of new tar down, anything from a couple of inches to 4 or 5 inches. And if it's a badly potholed road, you might have 2 layers. The first one would regulate and fill the potholes, and the second one would dress it. So you can just do your basic overlay. Sometimes you might have to plane out first, plane out the old material. If it was in the town, for example, you wouldn't want your final layer to be above the ironwork or the curb. So you have to take out the old tar so that the new tar just goes back to the proper level. So that's an inlay. So they can cost anything. If it's a basic overlay, it might be, say, £20 per square metre. If you have to do a lot of planing out and you're doing a pucka inlay with asphalt rather than just ordinary bitmac, then it might cost you £35 a square metre. So £35 a square metre or £20 a square metre compared to £3 to £5 a square metre for surface dressing is, it's a no-brainer. You want to do as much surface dressing as you can to extend the life of the road so that you never have to do any surfacing, because that's the expensive stuff. Of course, as the budget has depleted and our surface dressing program has become smaller, the general condition of the road network has got worse. And so the requirement to do more overlays, it becomes greater. So it's a downward spiral then, because you need more and more money to fix the problem. Obviously, in between, you've got the filling of potholes, which stems the tide. And if you do a good job and you can keep on top of it, then you may never have to just do the expensive surfacing. If you can catch a road, fill the potholes that need filling, and then surface dress it. So do some pre-surface dressing patching and then surface dress over the top. Then you've saved the day. That's a stitch in time. That's a great success story, and we're in that position all over the Highlands. And it brings the tears to the eye when if you're driving around your own network and you can see so many roads that need surface dressing, and they're not going to get done maybe for the next 2 or 3 years. And so by the time 2 or 3 years has come around, it's too late, and they then need overlays, and that's very, very expensive. And then to try and get round them all with overlays is probably going to take you another 5 or 6 years. And by the time you get to year 6, it's like a bomb site. So it's all about stitching time at the moment. Well, and for the last few years, trying to use those objective measurements that we get from the scrim tests, which is the survey machine, gathering information from members, from the public, community councils, complaints, our own officers, obviously, and so combining. So trying to prioritize and make engineering intervention is happening all the time to try and make the best decisions and make the money go as far as we can.
Okay, thank you, Richard. I think Ben may put his hand up, maybe to ask another question on jet patching. But before I do so, can I just, this new felt machine that you described being looked into, what is the likelihood that Lochaber will see a machine like that?
Don't know. if I ask for one and fight for it, we may get one. We might have to share it with somebody, but that's reasonable. They're quite. I don't actually know the cost of them, okay. But it's a van-based machine, not a lorry, so it'll be a lot cheaper than the jet patcher.
Richard, I am sure that my colleagues would want to assist in you fighting for this piece of equipment. So if you could kindly let us have more details about this particular element of the programme, then I certainly would go into battle, and I'm sure many of my colleagues would do so, and particularly, of course, those within the administration who would use their influence to persuade funding to come this way.
Chairman, if I may, it's not something we're firmly decided on in area as officers either yet, because it's the same dilemma. If we hire it in, it's very efficient. We don't have the maintenance costs or the operating costs or the worry about maximising the efficiency of it when we're not using it. So we do have the option to hire it at the moment, and we haven't used it in Lochaber, and these machines have been around for years. So rushing to buy one might not necessarily be the right thing to do. Still trying to assess that situation. I'm very, very grateful for your support on that.
Okay, Councillor Thompson, did you have an additional question on jet patching? Because your hand went up during that previous discussion. You're on silent. You've unmuted yourself and then it muted again.
Thank you, Andrew. I just did have a question for clarity on the topic of the jet patcher. Richard, you kind of, I think you pointed towards the answer, but just to be clear, hiring the machine, I presume no external staff or contractors come with that hire. So the jet patcher, the hired patcher is staffed by full-time council employees. Is that correct? Thank you.
Chairman, Councillor Thompson, I don't think I made that clear, so that's a good question. No, it actually comes with an operator, and it's a one-man operation, that type of machine. It's a front-mounted machine, and so again, that's very efficient. And for example, we're able to send him across to the islands on his own with a programme of work. Obviously, we're dipping in and out in terms of supervision, but it's a very efficient operation in terms of, for example, accommodation for the number of operatives. It's one man, one machine. So that, again, that works very well.
Okay, thank you. I don't know, Richard, if you've covered all the questions. Now, I lost track because of the lengthy discussion on jet patcher, but can you possibly just double check? You've certainly covered Councillor Allen's questions about the different types of work that's undertaken. So I think that's probably... Go on.
It was the collaboration with Bear. So thanks again, Councillor Thompson, for acknowledging that. I appreciate that very much. Yeah, so we are looking at opportunities wherever we can to do that, and there are clear definitions of who's responsible for what when it comes to the interface between local authority roads and trunk roads, and we do work within that, and yeah, we try to keep a close eye on that and not let Bear get away with not doing as much as they should be when it comes to Bellmouth. So thanks for that one.
Okay, Councillor Raman, I know you joined a little way through this discussion. Have you got a technical question rather than a specific area that you want to have looked at the moment? I'm going to deal with those separately.
Just regarding the potholes.
Yeah.
I feel that they're putting too much tar into them, and you're getting a very rough journey. You're bumping up and down instead of being smooth.
Okay, maybe Mr. Porteous wants to deal with that. Although, to be quite honest, I'd rather go up and down than into a pothole. I know that one of our esteemed colleagues, the Leader of the Opposition, has a different view on that we shouldn't fill. as people don't want them filled. But we'll leave that aside. But Mr. Porteous, would you like to respond to Councillor Rammon's point about the roughness of the road after pothole repairs?
Thanks, Councillor Rammon. Yes, certainly taking what you've said into account. Obviously, we would always try to leave a smooth finish. So I'll take that back to the team and we'll look into that. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. And now I think, having dealt with the questions, we'll go back to members that had specific propositions. So in the first instance, it will be Councillor Allen and then Councillor Henderson and Councillor Rickson. I've seen your hand go up as well.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the appendix to the report, which is specifically what you're suggesting we should be looking at now, I would like to propose that that budget is amended to include, I'm certain it will be surface dressing or overlay. Richard, you'll be impressed with that. At Grange Terrace in Fort William, which is a very narrow road serving a residential area that has been patched and patched for years. In fact, officers have been good enough to follow up requests from myself in the past to do further patching. But I'm thinking, Richard, that this is definitely a road that you yourself have suggested has got beyond that. It's a difficult road to treat strategically, for want of a better word, because it's a narrow road. It's continually parked, cars are continually parked on it, and that's one of the problems, that cars can't avoid the potholes and pothole patches and mount the pavement, which has put a pavement in a bad state of repair as well, and indeed is dangerous. So it will need a bit of management to surface dress or overlay that piece of road. But nevertheless, that should, and I suspect that's perhaps why there's been some reluctance over the years to address the issue, because it is a difficult bit of road to deal with. So that's what I'd like to propose, Andrew. I know that you may have concerns about that section of road as well, and I'd like to have that included within the budget, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen, for that very helpful suggestion. Yes, and I would certainly support Councillor Allen in trying to seek inclusion within the this financial year's programme for that particular road. It's deteriorated considerably. I haven't visited it recently, but both Councillor Allen and myself have seen photos taken by residents in the last fortnight that demonstrate how serious the road condition has got now, and we would certainly appreciate seeking some resolution there. And I may come back and suggest another road later, but I'll let Councillor Henderson go first.
Okay, thanks. Since I live quite close and walk quite a lot on that road, maybe get Blair just to clarify, does he mean Grange Road or Grange Terrace? Because originally he said the terrace, and I suspect it's the road he's speaking about.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's the terrace. It's the cul-de-sac at the top, past Grange Road. So I think terrace is correct. Is that not right?
Yeah,
Yep.
You're correct.
Yep.
It's just I thought you were speaking because
Yeah,
the road's not in the best of nick either,
No.
with all the traffic calming it's on it either. But no, that's fair. That's okay. Thanks.
Yeah, it's
on that
definitely the
note,
terrace, Councillor Henderson.
Just picking up on what Andrew said there about the photographs. I in fact visited this last week, and it is indeed it's got worse, even worse than from when I last saw the road. So I have looked at that personally this week. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Allen, that's appreciated. Back to you, Councillor Henderson.
Sorry to intervene there in that particular one. It might be quite interesting, again, just because I am on the Roads Collaboration Board working with Bayer, Transport Scotland and the Council. So when you do have any issues like that, where there's sort of joint working, if you bring it to my attention, I can certainly bring it direct to that table there, because there's one that always crops up. It's the hedge cutting along Akintour Road, Akintour Gardens there, down on the front there. And because the council cut the inside, sometimes the top, but generally speaking, it's Bere that have to cut the outside and the top, you know, so it's double working, that type of thing. So these are jobs that we need to looked at. There's also probably some, Richard maybe hasn't quite got it yet, but I believe that there is a new type of JCB which had been pointed out about a year ago, and we were told it wouldn't work up here. But I believe there are actual tests starting somewhere in the Highlands today. Obviously, the company themselves are coming up and will be showing to some of our senior officers there. So hopefully, it sounds like a very interesting piece of machinery. It doesn't cost a fortune, but does multiple tasks. Roundabout potholes, you know, cutting it out square, tidy, and then being able to fill it up as well and go away with a left job. So it sounds like a cut price jet patcher. So, but also got many more uses being a JCB, because that we use quite a lot of them anyway. My point actually on what I was talking about, the capital works, the programme there, and it was something that cropped up the other week at Glengarry Community Council. There are some works going on up in the area, not on the road. There are construction works there, and apparently it's ripping the road to bits. So it was just out of interest to know, are you actually monitoring that? I haven't actually got a response to that, although I've sent an email. Are you actually monitoring? Is there likely to be reparations made once the construction works are finished? And if not, could you look at the 40,000 that's being allowed here? And I know it's for drainage that's been long sought for away, I think at the far end, but it might actually be prudent to divert that money if it's going to save a breakup of a huge area of the road, you know, on that Kinlochurn area there. So it's maybe something just to take on board there. And by the way, thank you very much for getting the work between yourself and Mark organised in the Mallig area. Again, long waited for, but I haven't actually seen a lot of compliments other than somebody complaining that there's still some water running and sitting on the surface. But I know where it's coming from. It's got nothing to do with the road. It's from private houses that are up a lane, and it comes down. That there's a stank not a million miles away from it, so I'm sure it's something that can happen. But anyway, thanks for that, and thank you for presenting this programme again. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Rickson next.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, Richard, to endorse what Alan has just been saying there, how much we appreciate the work that you've done in Mallig. And Alan, I'm afraid you put in a lot of the background work to get this, and I'm the one receiving some of the compliments, in the sense that the village is extremely pleased to see it, although obviously disgruntled that we couldn't include the car parking area as well. But it's a huge improvement, Richard, and thank you very much indeed, that, and Alan, for all your hard work. Richard, a particular question is to do with the stretch of road beyond the Mora level crossing. That is really dangerous now, and the reason it's dangerous is that people drive on the wrong side of the road just to avoid going along on the bit that's damaged. So you actually have a situation now where cars are either driving in the middle of the road or on the right-hand side. The only thing I would add to that is that you've got a length of 305 metres. Can I ask you if you could maybe have a look just the other side of the railway crossing as well into Mora village? And the reason I say that is that there was a sort of programme of village improvements probably at least 20 years ago now, where they resurfaced the road in the village with a slightly different colour of bitumen and so on. And it's really badly cracking now. So although it's not as bad as the bit beyond the level crossing, it's pretty dire for the centre of a small village. The second thing I was going to say is perhaps also if you could look at the entrance to Glengarry Terrace in Coole, just where it comes off the Kilmallie Road, because that's been patched on multiple occasions in the past, and I think it'd be worth a good look. The final thing I was going to say was simply that we have at Council heard representations before about the use of recycled material in road dressings. And councillors were actually very keen that we should do an experiment within Highland Council area for that to happen. We then had a subsequent meeting at which it turned out that no such experiment had actually taken place yet. And again, councillors pushed officers to see if we could get an experimental use of recycled material. Now, I fully understand that you won't necessarily want to have that on a road where there's a lot of usage or where cars are travelling at speed. But I'm sure a lot of these potholes actually occur in housing estates and other areas where cars are generally going quite slowly. So it does strike me that this is perhaps a way in which you could squeeze a bit of extra money for the Lochaber area. If we could perhaps offer to do a pilot using some of that extra money as a way of introducing recycled material into our road surface dressing, just to see if it would work. Now, I appreciate that this is an experimental technique and there are differing opinions about how effective it would be, but I certainly think it'd be one to try. Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vixen. And then before I ask Richard to respond to all of those, I will go to Councillor Thompson, and then I have a specific road that I wish to speak about as well. So Councillor Thompson, first of all.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a general question. I don't want to raise a specific road until I've heard the answer, and that is the council has allocated a sum from reserves to each ward of £100,000, and potentially that money could be used for roadworks, I presume. It's what I would like to know from Richard is what time frame would be necessary for the programming of any works, should that money be put to that use of going into roadworks. I presume you would need to know ASAP if any extra money was to go into the Lochaber or Ward 11 roads budget for this to be spent this summer. Thank you.
Okay, that's an important question, and my understanding from reading the report, Mr. Porteous, maybe I've got this wrong, is that £100,000 per ward you already are lumped into the capital budget in front of us here today?
Chairman, that's correct. There's a couple of £100,000. We may be talking about two different ones. Yeah, that's been the approach, is that the area £100,000 per roads is lumped in to our capital package. But I believe that members, there's another £100,000 which has come. Councillor Thompson's nodding. I think maybe initially it was mentioned that play parks might be something people are interested with that, but I think you've got a carte blanche possibly on what you can spend that on. I'm not an expert on that, but I think that might be the case.
So it's the place-based budget that you're referring to, Councillor Thompson. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so I think that's answered that question. Yeah,
and the more notice we could get, the better. That is the answer to that. To allow us to plan it in if we were going to try and use it this summer, if some of that was to come our way, we'd be very grateful.
Okay, Councillor Thompson, did you want to follow up that, having heard that answer?
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly, that one of the projects that was put forward for town centre funding was Cool Shops car park, and it didn't receive that money, but I think a works order was programmed for it. So I would like that to be considered for inclusion in the roads capital budget. Obviously, there's a funding implication of it, and that's why I asked the question that I just asked. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thompson. And then I have a couple of roads that I would like to mention, Richard. First of all, number 1 and 2 on the programme, which is the Sunnet side A884. It would be really useful for ward members if you could circulate out with this meeting details exactly to which stretches of their A884 are due for repair there. I certainly would appreciate that in answering questions from the Lochaber community, and that's where I want to focus and not on now. I am receiving lots of complaints about the A884 as it enters Lochaber village, heading down the hill, and the particular road surface there. I haven't inspected it myself, but both the community council and residents within the community are saying that there has been a significant increase on heavy goods vehicle traffic using the Lochaber to Fishnesh ferry over the last year, coming along that road and causing a considerable amount of damage. And I know the only people that have benefited from that are the local garages in repairing springs and suspension, which I can sympathise with. having gone through 3 springs myself in the last year on one car, and I've hardly driven it anywhere. But that's aside from that. Can we look within this budget at shifting emphasis to see that repaired as a matter of urgency? And I would say I would be interested in. There is a substantial section, over 4 kilometres of the B8043, which is the Kingairloch Road, that is receiving surface dressing, and I recognise that it is in a poor state of repair, and it's been on the list for a long time. But however, compared to the main A884 road and the level of traffic that goes on it, the Kingairloch Road is not on that level of use compared to the Lochaber Road itself. And if we are looking to alter the programme to enable a revenue to be spent elsewhere, to capital to be spent elsewhere, then that may be a possibility. And to assist you in this, Richard, because we've listed a whole list of things that we would like to see added within this capital programme, which will give you a great nightmare in doing so. And rather than say end this discussion with recommendations from the committee, I could take Councillor Allen's proposal for Grange Terrace to be done and second it and have that as a formal resolution of this committee. I don't think that would be particularly helpful for you necessarily. Is to ask the resolution from this committee, so as none of this is lost, is for you to take note of all of those requests and report back to our next ward business meeting as to how you think that this can be accommodated within this year's capital programme. Would that be a fair way of doing it, Richard, without putting you on the spot today and giving commitments that you might not be able to meet?
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, that sounds very fair. In the programme, in the appendix to the report, there are obviously some lines in there which are contingencies. And the cul-de-sac at Grange Terrace is not hugely long. And obviously, we are doing revenue patching through the summer. There's a patching contingencies and other contingencies in this appendix. And so the line between what's a large patch or patching scheme and what's a small surfacing scheme, they're a bit blurred sometimes. So I would hope that we would be able to accommodate that. But I'm grateful that you're not putting me on the spot just now. But I don't think there's anything that we're particularly worried about in what's been suggested today. One of the comments there about switching the Kingairloch Road out for doing more on the A884. The good thing is this extra capital money that we've been given this year, we're also receiving next year, and we can't always do everything now anyway. We can't fix all the roads all at once. We have to spread it. We have to have a planned program. So if we haven't, we will give you the maps for the surface dressing on the A884 ASAP after this meeting. I'm trying to remember if the bit that you were talking about is included it, but I would have to check that. But if we don't get it this year, I would like to think we can get it next. The B8043 is certainly a high priority from an engineering point of view. If we don't catch it this year, we might have to overlay it next year, which we probably couldn't afford. So it's these balances that we're trying to strike all the time, and the subjective view and the objective view are quite often at odds. But we try to work with both if it makes sense, and within the budget and with member agreement, etc. So I very much appreciate the fact that and would take up that invite to come back to the ward business meeting. I think that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that from recollection, Dot Ferguson may correct me here. It's in 3 weeks' time, so it gives you or maybe it's longer, but if it's not 3 weeks' time, we're putting a special one within 3 weeks, just for you, Richard.
Sorry, Andrew, Councillor Baxter, Chair. We haven't really spoken about timescales, but at the moment, our surface dressing programme, yes, somebody mentioned recycling as well. Councillor Rickson, thank you for that. We're doing a large section of Glen Etive in this programme, well over 2 kilometres of road recycling down there. That's using the existing material, not trialling any of the experimental recycled type material, which you would add in. So we're using traditional stone, which is obviously tested in terms of hardness, etc. And that's from what I know of these experimental materials, such as is it plastics in particular, then the industry is yet to be convinced for sort of large scale surfacing works. But there's situations where they're low risk, such as a car park, an amenity car park, as opposed to a car park that's getting high volumes of heavy vehicles or something like that. But we're very much leading the way in terms of our own recycling, DLO recycling in Lochaber. This will be one of a number of roads we've now done down here, and we've got others in mind for future years that we would like to use this technique for. And it's the last estimates was the cost of recycling a road is about £10 a square metre. So you can see it's significant. It's half the price of a £20 per square metre overlay, because you're not importing materials. You're reworking. Well, you're bringing in some extra bitumen, and you're bringing in some extra stone, and you're surface dressing over the top, but you're not importing large quantities of hot tar. So it's half the cost. You're recycling the materials that are there. You basically grub up the road, rework it, re-level it, recompact it, retreat the surface after adding a bit of material into the mix. So it's a very efficient way of doing things, and we're getting very good at that down in Lochaber. Hence why we're going to do well over 2 kilometres in Glen Etive this summer. Well, we're actually proposing we require to start that a week today, and surface dressing requires to start shortly after, once that's complete, basically on about the 10th of May. So we're hoping that we can push on with these suggested overlays and inlays. The additional section on the A884 we could easily accommodate next year, and any small additions like Grange Terrace, I'm pretty confident we can manage to include that this year with the contingencies that we've set out. So I think we're in a good place.
Okay, I'm going to go back to Councillor Allen, but because he will want to respond on what you've said about Grange Terrace. But can I just urge you to have another look at the A884 at Loch Allen? I noticed, I know that you're saying it could be done next year. I'm not convinced that we can wait that long. But I'm reliant on you and Mark Smith as a roads engineer. Can you please come back to Ward 21 councillors about the current state and the impact that it's having from a substantial increase in heavy goods vehicles using that route? And then I'll go to Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. I did want to lend my support to your observations around the road coming into Loch Allen. I certainly don't think you can wait till next year. But I just wanted, and Richard just covered it at the end of his comments there. My hand was still up. I think what Richard is saying is that he can accommodate, I was going to say, an overlay or surface dressing arrangement at Grange Terrace this year. But I am content that we finalise matters, as you've suggested, at the next ward business meeting. Initially, I put my hand up because I had misread my calendar and thought it was June. I do believe it is indeed 3 weeks today to the next ward business meeting, and I'm content to wait till then. But I'm also content. I think that we have got agreement at today's meeting that Grange Terrace will be included this year. Is that a correct interpretation of what you and Richard are saying, Andrew?
I certainly, from my point of view, and I can see that Richard is nodding his head. He has given that commitment, and he thinks that Grange Terrace. He's given the commitment, not think. He's given the commitment to sort Grange Terrace within this financial year.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. I think that covers everything then. I think that's a really useful discussion and a useful outcome on various matters. Councillor Thompson, you wanted to come back in before I close this debate.
Thanks, Chair. I did raise the Cool Shops car park.
You did indeed. My apologies.
Which a work order had been raised for. So if we could have a response to that, please. Thank you.
Richard, are you able to deal with that, please? A very important issue for Cool residents.
Yeah, that was raised in the context of this possible extra money, places and people fund. I can't remember what you called it, Councillor Baxter, but somebody hit the nail on the head when we were trying to describe what that was called.
It's a place-based budget.
Thank you. I'll write that down. I won't forget it. Place-based. So that was within the context of possible extra funding there. So I'm sure if that was confirmed, we could arrange it.
Okay. It will assist you, Richard, that councillors are discussing that particular budget this afternoon within our ward business meeting, I believe. So maybe there will be an outcome from that Dot will follow up with you as our ward manager.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time as always, Richard, and your patience with our questioning, which is always appreciated.
Chairman.
Yes.
Obviously, as I say, time is marching on, and the weather is been good to us, and we have to make a start with these programs. So, can I assume that I know we've got this ward business meeting coming up, but anything that comes out of that is likely to be an addition or a tweak. So presumably we've got basic agreement to push on as is.
Yes, indeed. So the formal recommendation is on the paper that we are agreeing. The allocation, the priorities as set out in Appendix 1. So despite what we've asked you to come back with to see how you can jig that budget to enable those items that councillors have asked you to look at to also be included. That doesn't mean that we are putting any halt on you proceeding with your roads programme now. So the recommendation is that we approve the proposed prioritised 21-22 roads programme for the Lochaber area and have asked officers to respond to individual changes to that programme and report back to a future ward business meeting. I think that covers it, Richard, in terms of allowing you to continue with that work. And members, have we got agreement for that recommendation somewhat amended there?
Agree.
Thank you. Dot, I see your hand up. Was it
Chairman,
process?
Yeah, it was just to clarify about process there, where if there are any changes coming back on the basis of Richard's coming back to next ward business meeting, any particular changes will probably need to go to the future area committee just for final agreement.
That's fine. I think we can homologate them on that basis, but we are giving Richard the ability to change the overall budget allocation within what's on this paper and to report back to ward business meeting, and any specific changes can then be homologated at a future area committee. I think if everyone's content with that. Councillor Allen.
Yeah, it was on that. Thank you, Chair. It was on that very point about homologating at the next area committee, which is when, June or July or something?
August, I think it is.
August. That wouldn't mean that my proposal and what we've agreed in terms of Grange Terrace would be delayed until then? Given Richard's comments about the good weather at the moment?
I don't think it needs to be delayed until homologation. We're just, in terms of governance, saying that we have signed that off at a ward business meeting and it has to be confirmed at an area committee. I don't think necessarily means that we need to delay the implication of that. We're in essence giving Richard delegated authority to change his overall budget allocation according to our requests and reporting back as to how he has done that at our next ward business meeting. Dot, have I got that right?
I was just going to say, if there was a particular imperative around this, then I think that would be acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because, sorry to interrupt, Chairman. Obviously, as I was pointing out, the contingencies element helps, I think, in that regard, doesn't it?
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of governance, maybe to tidy it up, and maybe Dot and Alistair, as our committee clerk, could assist here. If I change the recommendation to members approve the proposed prioritised roads programme for the financial year for Lochaber area, requested a number of amendments within the overall budget allocation, for officers to spend, and those changes would be reported back to a future ward business meeting, and if necessary homologated at the area committee thereafter. There, I think we are being completely clear about what we're doing, and it's the overall budget and how it's allocated. Richard still has the flexibility to move his budget around accordingly.
Thanks, Andrew. Chairman, could you explain to me what homologated means?
It's simply homologation means that we approve retrospectively at a future area committee.
Thank you.
Alistair, as our committee clerk, are you content with that?
Yes, Chair, that would be appropriate, as long as any changes were put back to a future area committee.
Thank you. Members, are you content that we approve that recommendation? Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you, Richard, as always. Much appreciated your time this morning.
Thanks, Chairman. Members.
Thank you. And we shall go back to item 4, as I think Don Essen is sat patiently through all of that, and back to our education update. Lovely to see you, Don. Over to you.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair and members. Thank you for inviting me to the committee meeting this morning. I'm going to give you a brief education update, and I can take any questions thereafter. Just initially, due to COVID restrictions over the last 12 months, there's been no Education Scotland inspections or inspection reports. So there's nothing to report back to Area Committee regarding that. In terms of staffing, I'd like to give you the following update on acting appointments in the area of officers in education, so that you've got these details, members. First of all, I'm now acting Area Education and Learning Manager, and have been so since the beginning of November. In terms of further appointments in November right the way through to January, we've got an acting Education Quality Improvement Manager, who's Stephen Hamilton, whose substantive post is Head Teacher of Coole Primary School. And we've got an acting Quality Improvement Officer, who's Mary MacDonald, and Mary's Cluster Head Teacher at Carbost and Struan. And we've got a part-time addition to our early years team. We've got a Melanie Nicholson, who's currently at South Lodge Primary School, and Melanie's doing point 4 as early years education support officer. So that's the kind of the West area team just now, so you've got an update regarding that. In terms of key worker and vulnerable children support, from January onwards, education and learning staff have been working to support our vulnerable children and the children of eligible key workers, as well as providing remote learning. So that's been an ongoing expectation and support. In terms of remote learning and phased return to primary and then secondary schools, the Highland Council has been working with families and continue to adapt to periods of remote learning. We've had successful remote learning being provided across Highland by the ICT team, and there's been huge benefits of the previous Chromebook rollout. And we're continuing to learn and develop, building confidence in staff, children, young people and parents and carers regarding this. And it's very pleasing to note that our remote learning guidance, Highland Council remote learning guidance, has been shared with Education Scotland and has received very positive feedback. Head teacher empowerment allowed for individual settings and contextualised decision making to take place, and schools have been working within the guidance framework to implement the remote learning in their own unique local context. In terms of area working, area teams have been liaising with schools to update staff as and when guidance is released by the Scottish Government, and area managers lead weekly meetings to update head teachers on necessary actions to support schools and to communicate local and national pictures. Area teams continue to support schools throughout this period through the Education Quality Improvement Manager and Officer, the ASN Manager and Officer, and the Early Years Education Support Officers and Practice Lead schools. In terms of information going to and from schools, we've had a system whereby thematic questions have been submitted from head teachers on a weekly basis, and these inform questions and the area meetings which have been taking place on a weekly basis. We've had updates on the position statement, which are again shared on a weekly basis as and when things change, so that schools have got the information most readily at hand. And council officers are continuing to help and support the schools and parents in terms of remote learning guidance and in terms of supporting key areas like supporting health and well-being and mental health and well-being. And you'll be aware that Treehouse has been used, which is developed by Tree of Knowledge to support some of the issues around mental health and well-being. In terms of area operational meetings, these have been linking with education, health and safety, CCFM, catering, cleaning, transport and residences and such on a fortnightly basis, and this has been really ongoing since March 2020, and we're very pleased to inform about the very, very strong operational partnership working that have been taking place across the areas to support our schools through these challenging periods of time, and of the successes regarding that. So I'd like to thank the various teams for their ongoing help and support regarding that. In terms of ongoing COVID mitigations, as I mentioned previously, on a regular basis, we've had updated position statement which have been shared with schools, and as part and parcel of that, we've had updated risk assessments and guidance going out to schools and looking at the ongoing help and support and mitigations. And this has been done very closely in touch with the health protection team and also with our own health and safety team. So that has been ongoing, and I again like to thank the health and safety team for their ongoing help and support with that. We've seen great service connection and collaboration over the last 12 months during COVID, and we've seen a lot of very effective work collaboratively across the service, both in areas and strategically, and the linkage between that. Again, that has been very strong and positive, and this has included such things as weekly meetings with the senior leadership team, the tactical team regarding COVID, and the Return to School Board. And most recently, we've had the reconvening of the reopening transport group, the school reopening transport group, which is chaired by David Summers. And this has again been very helpful and supportive as we move towards the full return to schools. Also like to highlight the very strong partnership working with NHS Highland regarding supporting our children and young people, especially the more vulnerable children and young people, and also to support our welfare to acknowledge the support of our welfare team and the work of Sheila McCandy and her team to support our most vulnerable families, including giving the provision of free school meals vouchers. And this has been very successful. Communications with staff, parents and pupils. We've been ensuring all communications to staff, parents and pupils have been up to date and done on a regular basis. And there's been monthly meetings with the Highland Parent Council Partnership to ensure effective communications. And the next meeting of that is taking place on this Thursday evening, and it includes a kind of feedback regarding the SQA procedures, revised procedures, as we move ahead. As I mentioned beforehand, we've had a particular emphasis ongoing with the COVID in terms of supporting mental health and well-being, and there's been a lot of information shared for pupils, parents and staff regarding supporting mental health and well-being, and we've worked very closely with our psychological services and the area education manager of additional support needs and the support needs officers regarding supporting that as part of GIRFIC and the Highland practice model. In terms of school returns, we've got, before the holidays, we had early years in primary schools returning full time. In March, we had secondary schools on various rotation systems for the last 3 weeks of term. And I'm very pleased to announce that today we had all primary and secondaries returning on a full-time basis. And I'd like to again thank and acknowledge the ongoing support of all area and strategic teams for their ongoing help and support in supporting our children and young people in these very challenging times. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Don, and welcome to your new acting post. It was very remiss of me not to welcome you formally, because I think it's the first committee that you've attended since that appointment. But I guess that brings me to my only particular question today, which you outlined a management structure with a substantial number of acting posts. Can you tell us when those posts are likely to become substantive and what the recruitment timetable for those are, so that we have certainty for those individuals concerned within those acting posts, and also for the wider educational establishment in the West? That would be very helpful, Don.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of moving ahead, we've got these temporary interim posts just now, obviously as an interim measure, and the understanding is that we're moving forward with this kind of staged approach basis. The understanding is that it's going to be looking at it at strategic and area manager level in the first instance, and trying to get agreement regarding that by the summer holidays, and then for the area structure to be agreed and rolled out. And the understanding is the hope that this will be moved forward by Christmas time in terms of the appointment process, so that we've got the finalised both the strategic and area manager process and arrangements, and also the area level linkage to the centre regarding that, and that to be completed by Christmas time. I think that those are the provisional dates regarding that, Chair.
Thank you. That's very useful, Don. Thank you. Any specific questions, members? No, I think you've got off remarkably lightly, Don, for once. So no one is specifically got no questions. I would say as a parent that I'm delighted about today. It's been a long time coming, and I would also say as a parent and as a counsellor, we should note our thanks for all of the school staff across the whole of Lochaber. A few of us, Councillor Thompson and myself, have seen it close hand as parents as to what they have been doing within our schools over the last few months during this particular lockdown, and the the amount of effort and commitment school staff have put into ensuring that our children still receive the education that they're entitled to under the most difficult circumstances. So I think it is only right that we note our thanks to those staff across all the Lochaber schools that have stepped up to the plate in remarkable ways over the last year. And I can see many of my colleagues nodding their heads in agreement there. So, Don, can you find a way at some point in the future in passing on our thanks and best wishes to all Lochaber staff?
I will, Chair. Thank you very much for that. And also I'd like to thank you as members for all your help and support through these very, very challenging times as well. I know that a number of you I've been in touch with at regular or irregular times regarding some of the questions, and I would reiterate that I'm here for you to get in touch regarding any queries specifically to do with education. And I know most of you, and I've known most of you for a number of years, and just to make sure that you realise I'm here and I'm available to get in touch at any time. Thank you very much.
We appreciate that, Don. Thank you very much. See you at a future committee meeting, if not before. And members, that brings us on to our final item on the agenda, which is the minutes of the meetings on the 18th of January this year and the special meeting of the committee on the 23rd of March for a noting as previously circulated. And I can't see any queries on any of those, and I think that brings our meeting to an end. Thank you everyone for your contributions this morning, and I shall see you this afternoon at our ward business meeting.